All right, well, let's get to our segment today where we're going to talk about DVC. Now, obviously, if you've listened to the show, if you haven't, well, hello. We are not DVC members ourselves. We've rented points. We're somewhat familiar with DVC, but we never act like we're experts.
We're not experts.
Yeah,
No
so
way.
we're not going to sit here and, read off of a script and act like we know what we're talking about on this. So we figured what's a better way is just to bring somebody on that is an expert on this stuff. So that's what we did.
And I actually, if I have questions about it, I ask this person.
Yes. And she's a friend of the show. First time on the show, though, is that we're having Samantha K on, and she goes by, it's at DVC Millennial on Instagram, and I don't know if Twitter, so let us know. But Samantha, welcome to the show, and you're our resident DVC expert, so congratulations.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. Well, like we said, we're not DVC experts. You are, and your actual entire, all the content you put out revolves around DVC. So, and you are the one that we ask when we have questions. So it does make sense here. So before we get going on this, what's your background in, how'd you get into DVC and all that stuff?
So I became a DVC member February 2018. I got my points the day after Valentine's Day, and I own at Old Key West. And I got into DVC because my family's been going to Disney pretty much every year since 1994. But my parents did not own Disney Vacation Club. For me, it was after I took my first big girl trip where I planned it by myself and paid for it myself that I was like, okay, I want to keep doing this every year, but I don't have a couple $1,000s to just shell out every year to go to Disney. So how can I make this a little bit more affordable for myself while ensuring I can keep coming back? So DVC just fit into that.
Yeah. Well, Jamie's parents owned a DVC for a bit.
They did.
And then
they did.
They sold. They don't have it anymore. It was at Boardwalk, and I'm still bitter that they got rid of it. But it's okay.
Boardwalk is such a great resort.
It's so great. It's so great. So, Well, what is Disney Vacation Club, first of all? Because we keep saying DVC. It's Disney Vacation Club. So, what if you were to describe it to somebody that has no idea, never been to Disney, doesn't really, not familiar with anything like that? What would you tell them?
So I will give you the official Disney answer of it is a flexible timeshare program owned by Disney Vacation Development. So it's not you're going to the same resort at the same week every single year. You can pick and choose what resorts you stay at based on availability. And you have a certain number of points every year to book with. So it's not like every single time I go to Disney, I'm at Old Key West for a week in September. I can travel throughout the year, and I typically do. Or I could choose not to come at all this year and go next year.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah, no. Now, okay, so DVC, we'll just kind of refer to it from now on.
Okay.
Because it's a long way to say it.
It is.
So there are resorts. So I guess that way to put it, people think of the Disney resorts, but DVC has their own basically subset of resorts inside of the resorts, kind of speaking.
Yeah, so it's either a standalone resort like Saratoga Springs, Old Key West, and Riviera. Those are the dedicated DVC resorts. Or there can be DVC villas within an existing resort like Grand Floridian, Polynesian, Wilderness Lodge. They all have DVC components that share space with the regular hotel guests.
And let me ask you a question. Did they, with all of the resorts that have just the cash rooms and the villas, did they retroactively go back and change some of the cash rooms? Did they all start just regular cash rooms and then go into some of the villas, like at Polynesian, for example? Because I know they made some of those DVC after the fact.
Yeah, so the model beforehand was just to build a standalone resort. So Old Key West was the first Disney Vacation Club resort. So they always intended that just to be used by DVC members. They have to keep some cash rooms in inventory just by law. Mm-hmm. But then once the other deluxe resorts kind of took off, it was okay, well, maybe we can fit some of these rooms to fit DVC. So Polynesian, they took over 3 buildings and now we're getting a tower. And then Wilderness Lodge, originally it was a separate building that all the DVC villas were in, which is Boulder Ridge. And then they went back in and added Copper Creek into the existing Wilderness Lodge building. So
Okay.
Yeah, I know sometimes people get confused because when we've rented
confusing.
points, like my brother, we're Wilderness Lodge, we had rented points, so we were in the DVC side. He was in the, regular hotel side, and technically ours was, I think was it Copper Creek? Because there's two inside of Wilderness
We
Lodge.
were Boulder Ridge
Boulder
for
Ridge.
this
There's
one.
Boulder Ridge and Copper Creek. And I said, we're Boulder Ridge. And he's like, where's that? And I was like, well, it just say Wilderness Lodge. So it's really confusing if you're not familiar with it, but that's kind of why I asked that. Okay, so the way DVC works, you don't have like it's not going to be like $200 a night. You have a point system. How would you explain that and how that operates?
So the easiest way to think about it is like our points are our cash that we use to book rooms. So just kind of like cash prices for hotel rooms can fluctuate throughout the year, points are the exact same. So we have a couple different travel seasons where September is going to be the lowest because people typically do not travel in September because kids are going back to school and Florida has hurricane season, and it's just a very low point season for that reason. Like they want people to book rooms during that time. And then your high point times are like Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. So when people are typically, taking their family vacations and kids are out of school. So it works almost exactly like the cash side of things. Like if the rooms are expensive on the cash side, they're probably expensive on the point side.
That would be weird if Polynesian was really cheap on the DVC side. So yeah, that makes sense.
So like, what's the average number of points that most people have? I don't know if and that's a very general question, but like what's a good amount of points for someone that say what they want to, go to Disney for like a week? Let's say like, is it 150? Is that about it?
Yeah, typically I tend to see people between like 150 and 200. Most DVC members do not travel as much as I do. So a lot of folks are doing like 2 weeks in a year or, 1 week in a larger villa. So most people are comfortable with 150 to 200, just depending on where they're booking and how big the room is.
Okay. And so DVC, obviously you have contracts. How do they work, and like do they expire, like all that stuff, for people that are maybe curious about it?
Yeah, so a contract for DVC has 4 parts. So you have your home resort. That is where your contract lives. That's where your points come from. So mine is Old Key West. You have your use year, which is when your travel year starts. So February is mine. So all of my points start February 1st. Then you have how many points you purchase. So every year I have the same number of points to use to book my rooms. And then the expiration date, because unfortunately DVC does not last forever. So each resort has an expiration date, and it's typically based off of when they started building the resort. So most of them are like 50-year contracts. There are some that are a little shorter, just because in the beginning, I don't think DVC really thought people would want it 50 years from then. So no matter when like your use year is, all of our contracts will expire on January 31st of whatever year they give you. So most of the older resorts like Old Key West, Boardwalk, Beach Club, those will expire in 2042. And then the newer resorts like Riviera, I believe that expiration is 2070. And then the cabins are 2075. So if you buy a newer resort, you get to enjoy it for longer. Okay.
Well, and I know sometimes they do like an extension, right? Was it Old Key West that had an extension? I don't know. Again, I'm not sure about any of this, but I feel like there was an extended contract thing that came out. Am I wrong?
Yeah, so it was probably about 10 years ago. Disney Vacation Club went to all the owners of Old Key West and said, for X number of dollars per point, we'll let you extend your contract for 15 years. Okay. And only about a third of them took that deal, because by that point, a lot of like Old Key West members were getting a little bit older. Maybe they weren't traveling to Disney as much. So for a lot of people, extending another 15 years just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So sometimes on the resale market, you'll see contracts that will say expires in 2042. So that's someone who chose not to take the extension. Some members who did, you'll see it say like extended to 2057.
Okay.
But if you buy Old Key West directly from Disney, you automatically get the 2057 date.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that's the part that's always been weird to me about I know they have the expiring contracts and things like that.
Well, speaking of buying direct,
Is this an ad now?
that was a segue into
I'm
my
just
next
kidding. I know.
question.
You did it like you were being secretive.
I was being
confused.
secret about it.
So we're talking about buying direct and resale. So what is the difference between, now obviously buying direct would be buying directly, like a contract directly from DVC, but there's also the resale market. I guess you want to talk about the differences and like, I guess the pros and cons maybe of each one.
Yeah, so the biggest obvious difference between the two is how much you're going to pay. So if you buy directly from Disney, you are buying at kind of a premium price. If you buy resale, you can save probably up to 50% off of what you would pay going through Disney. But there are some trade-offs with that. So resale members who purchased after April 4th of 2016, you're not eligible for any like membership extras or extra benefits. So you can't access the lounges like Top of the World Lounge, the Epcot Lounge, or the Starview Lounge, which is in Disneyland. You're not eligible for the Sorcerer Pass, which is the discounted annual pass that we can buy. You're not eligible for shopping and dining discounts, and you can't go to the Moonlight Magic events that are like DVC exclusive after hours events. So by going through Disney, like, yes, you're paying a higher price, but you're getting access to those perks. So, and the other big difference too is the amount of time it takes. So going through Disney, like I could call up my guide tonight and say, I want to buy 150 points at Fort Wilderness, and I'll have it probably tomorrow morning. Like it's a very quick process because they're selling you their own inventory. If you're going through resale, the process I've heard taking up to like 90 days for some people because there's just kind of so many steps you have to go through buying it third party. And Disney does get 30 days to decide whether or not they'll buy back that contract. So then as the buyer, if Disney chooses to buy that contract back, you're starting all over again. So it's just a longer process, but it saves money. So you kind of have to like weigh if it's worth it.
Yeah, because I've heard of people saying, I mean, technically, it's your contract, but if you're trying to like sell it for way, way less than it's worth, Disney could step in and say, no, like we're going to buy that back and stuff like that. So I guess that prevents it from being like, insanely cheap on that end of things. So yeah, I think what's called first right of refusal, I think is what they have, or something along those lines. Yep. But yeah, they have the ability to do that. But
and then I know like the difference between the direct and resale is you have different cards, like different card colors, right?
Yeah, so we used to actually get physical like DVC cards. I still have mine, even though it expired like 3 years ago. Okay. So now everything is digital, so we don't get a card anymore.
Okay.
Now it's just on your My Disney Experience. It says DVC-Y means that you qualify for benefits. And I believe if you don't have that, it says like DVC-N. So like, no, you don't get them.
They made it really simple.
That's very simple.
But it used to be even simpler. So the cards, if you were a member that was eligible for membership extras, you had a blue card. And if you weren't, you got a white card. So it was really easy for cast members to tell like who got a discount and who didn't. So
now, is this all the reason why too? Because of that, some people will do like a mix. So they'll buy resale, but to get the benefits, there's a minimum amount of points that Disney requires you to have to be able to get the benefits, and some people will buy enough points directly from Disney, but yet still get resale contracts and still have that savings there.
Yeah, I know a lot of members, including myself, who are kind of hybrids. So they'll do exactly what you said. They'll buy the minimum through Disney that they need to get the perks, and then anything extra they need, they'll buy through resale. So that's what I typically recommend people who are looking into DVC. If the perks are really important to you, buy the absolute minimum through Disney, and then anything else that you need, buy through resale and save yourself a couple thousand, because if you need 300 points, you're going to come out ahead getting 150 direct and resale as opposed to all 300 with Disney.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and speaking of perks, what are all of the DVC member perks?
I know you mentioned some of them, but is there anything else that that is included in that?
So the big ones that people kind of are on the fence of if they're going to buy direct or resale are the access to the lounges, because they are really cool spaces, and it's kind of nice to have like an exclusive like members only space, especially in Epcot when it's 100 degrees during a festival and you just want somewhere to sit and cool off. That lounge is pretty great. And then some people, they're kind of on the fence because of the AP discount. So I can buy the Sorcerer Pass, which right now is priced at like $900, as opposed to what I would have to buy normally, which is the out-of-state pass, which is like $1,500 right now. So there's a bit of savings there.
Yeah.
So the other perks include like shopping discounts, like we can get up to 20% on certain items, dining discounts. That's usually like 10 to 15%, and it does not include a discount on alcohol. Members only events like Moonlight Magic, which is a free after hours event, or sometimes they'll do kind of little pop-up things throughout the year. Like this year they're doing a Valentine's thing at Boardwalk. They've done a Halloween event before. Sometimes they'll do things out on the West Coast at like California Adventure or Disneyland. So it's just kind of little fun perks that can just kind of pop up out of nowhere.
Gotcha.
Nice. Sounds good. They kind of sound similar. I mean, I think there's more in DVC, but it sounds very similar to like what APs get as far as like discounts and like a little bit of extras here and there. We don't have our own lounge, but
yeah, Disney. Well, Universal does, but not Disney. I was thinking Disney did, but yeah, they don't.
They don't. I would like one.
It would be nice,
Anyway,
just a pop-up tent even.
Okay, so I'm curious your opinion of this. What do you think is the best resort to buy at? Like if you're going for either a direct or resale contract, which do you think is the best to buy at right now?
So if you're buying either way, honestly, if you're buying direct or resale, I think either Copper Creek or Saratoga are really great buys. Both of them still have a pretty long time left on their contracts. Copper Creek, you get 44 more years on it. And then Saratoga expires in 2054. So you're still getting like 30 years worth of points. Both of them have pretty low dues. So you're not going to be paying a ton each year in annual dues. And Copper Creek is a really difficult resort to get into, especially around Christmas, because Wilderness Lodge is all decorated and like a lot of people want that resort around the holidays. And then Saratoga Springs is so large that if you're not someone who plans 11 months in advance, like typical DVC members do, if you're kind of more last minute planner, it's pretty easy to get into Saratoga most times of the year. So that's great for someone who's not like a type A planner like myself. So yeah, those are two really great buys if anybody's looking into buying DVC. You don't always have to buy like the brand new Riviera. You can pick any resort you want, even if you're buying direct. But those would be kind of my top two if I was buying today.
So what's your bottom one? Which is one that you probably would never buy a contract at?
Oh, wait, can I guess that would be Riviera? Because I've heard
It's
that before.
actually not.
Oh, okay, I've heard a lot of people say that about Riviera.
I really like Riviera.
I love Riviera. I just heard
really
that the contract side isn't the best sometimes.
Yeah, it was definitely a scary rule that they implemented with Riviera resale. For me, I see a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of, well, I can get Vero Beach or Hilton Head really cheap on resale, so I'm going to buy that and then use it to book at Disney World at 7 months. So I discourage people from doing that. So for me, those are the two resorts that I think are the worst buy, because yes, they're really cheap on the resale market. Like I think I saw a contract today for Vero Beach going for like $75 a point. Like you can get them really cheap. But they're both in hurricane-prone areas, so their dues are extremely high because they have to cover insurance and storm damage and kind of things that you might not necessarily think about if you're not from areas that get hit by hurricanes. So you don't really come out ahead cost wise because whatever savings you're making on the contract end, you're paying for down the road with annual dues.
Speaking of,
I was going to say,
speaking of
so
dues,
talk about the dues, because that is one thing that like I know a lot of people have questions about is, so what are they? I mean, I understand what they are, but like how would you describe them? And they do vary. Like we have seen, obviously you were talking about the places there, and then the cabins, the Fort Wilderness cabins, those are higher than some of the other ones as well. So it does vary, but like what are they, and why would they vary necessarily for like the cabins versus like just the regular hotel?
So our annual dues are our maintenance fees. So if anybody lives where there's like an HOA, it's similar to that. So they cover things like resort maintenance, if your resort is undergoing refurbishment, transportation, administrative costs. They're just like basically the operating expense of whatever resort you own at, you are responsible to help pay for. So they do change every year. They typically increase from like 3 to 8% every year. It just kind of depends. The older resorts you'll see have a little bit higher dues just because they are older buildings, so they require a little bit more maintenance. And the beach resorts are prone to storms, so they also have higher annual dues just because, you know, they're constantly repairing or insurance is going up, things like that. So I think what's happening with the cabins at Fort Wilderness and maybe why their dues are so high is because they are standalone structures. Like they're not rooms in like a hotel building. So maybe DVC is thinking they're going to be a little bit more prone to, if we have a hurricane and like a tree falls over, like that could cause a lot more damage. Housekeeping is going to be a big expense there because they're standalone units that allow pets. So you're going to be cleaning up after pets. And pets, even the most well-behaved ones, if you leave them in the room, they might cause a little bit of damage. So they have to fix that. And then Fort Wilderness has kind of a similar problem as Old Key West and Saratoga, where it relies entirely on bus transportation, which is really expensive because you have to have buses running through the resort constantly. So like Old Key West, I think our highest expense is transportation because it's a big resort and it only uses buses. So I think that's why theirs are so high.
Funny enough, I do know about Old Key West is that resort was not meant to have buses when they built it, because you can see when you
can tell.
Oh yeah, it's those. I've seen some bus drivers in there. I'm like, oh my gosh, like the way they do that. It's. I would not want to be
tight turns.
I would not want to be a bus driver in Old Key West. But yeah, that if you've ever been there, you can tell really quickly that buses do go through there, but it is not. They weren't designed for it. I'll put it that way. So
definitely not.
Now, is there a cap on? So you're talking about the dues increase. So this would be if people are looking at doing this. You obviously have your cost of your contract, but the dues are something you don't have a lot of control over. Is there a cap on how much they can increase that per year, or is that just completely out of your control?
It's kind of completely up to DVC. If property taxes go up in Florida, that affects dues. If your resort is one of the hurricane prone ones that got some damage, your dues might go up a little more than you thought the next year. I know Old Key West, I started out pretty low with dues. I think I started at like $7.50 a point. I now pay almost $10 per point because over the years, Old Key West has gotten a full refurbishment and it has a lot of landscaping and there's the golf course. So it's kind of out of your control. You can plan for it a little bit, but there have been some years where it's been like a bigger jump than others.
Right. Okay. So when they let you know that they're going up, is it just it shows up on like your invoice or however? Or do they like give you like 30-day, 60-day notice or something like that?
So they're pretty good at letting us know. I don't know for a lot of people if it's a great time frame that they let us know, but usually by the second week of November, they put out projected dues for the following year. And then the dues get voted on at the annual condo association meeting, which is usually the first week of December. So by the end of that meeting, we know what our dues are going to be for the following year. And then you have until, if you choose to pay them in one lump sum at the beginning of the year, you have until January 15th to pay them. Or if you do monthly payments, which is what I choose to do, your payments will start on January 15th.
It's so crazy. I see all these people that have like multiple contracts, like thousands of points, and I'm like, how much are you paying in dues every year? Like, it's insane.
Well, I guess that's a good question. How much? So one thing, I guess, before I forget about it. So there is like you said there's an association. So technically, if let's say Disney got real aggressive, that potentially could be curbed by that vote, and they would say you can't. So you do have a little bit of like a guardrail there, perhaps, because it's voted on, you said?
So the condo association is somewhat of a formality.
Okay, that's what I was kind of
have
wondering.
it. Like as members, we don't have like a vote. We
Gotcha.
have someone on the condo association who is like a representative of members. I mean, people get upset every year when annual dues come out because nobody likes to see the price of things increase.
Right.
A lot of folks call it a cure against adding on points because once you get that bill, you're like, ooh, I don't need any more. But I've never heard of it where the members got so angry at an increase that DVC backed off. Like, okay. I think people just expect like, okay, they're going to go up this year. Like, it stinks, but they're going to go up.
So you're saying they need to stage a revolt. That's what you're saying. Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I think you were. Oh, one thing I was going to ask for before you forget about it and move on.
Yeah.
How much typically are dues like compared to like your points? Like, is there a ratio that typically they do run? I know they said they vary from resort to resort, but is there like kind of a formula that is used?
Yeah, if there is a formula, it's like really advanced math that I don't know because I'm not an accountant.
Okay.
But it is based on which resort you pick as your home resort, and then your ultimate bill is based on how many points you owned.
Right.
So if you own at a resort like Old Key West, where it's a very large resort with a lot of landscaping, a golf course, and bus transportation, you're going to pay more than someone who owns at like Grand Floridian, which shares some of the costs with the regular resort guests who are paying cash and has a monorail and bus system and isn't really that big. So there's not a lot of like ground to take care of. And those villas are newer, so they require a little less maintenance than the Old Key West ones. So it just kind of depends on which one you pick, how much you're going to pay.
That's interesting. So if it does share with like a regular type resort, then obviously it's not all up to the DVC side. So interesting. Okay.
So what resort has the lowest annual dues?
I believe right now it's Bay Lake Tower, interestingly enough, just because it does share some of its costs with the resort side of the Contemporary. And because the Contemporary is kind of such a compact resort, it doesn't have a lot of space to take care of. Mm-hmm. And they have the monorail and buses, so they have a couple more options for transportation that aren't so costly.
Okay.
Well, airports aren't that hard to take care of. Really. I mean, there's not a lot of greenery. I'm only halfway kidding there. I'm sorry. Okay, so what would you say, going through all this, we'll do pros and cons here. What do you think the pros of being a DVC member are?
For me, the biggest pro is I get to go to Disney every year and stay at deluxe resorts and not pay the deluxe price. So over your membership, you do end up saving a little bit on staying deluxe. If you're someone who stays either moderate or deluxe most of the time, I think you'll see a cost savings. It makes DVC make a whole lot of sense. Mm-hmm. If you're someone who stays in value resorts, you might not see that cost savings year over year. So maybe DVC might not be for you, but still do the math. And then on the con side, it kind of favors people who plan or can plan things really far in advance. So the earliest that we can book at our home resorts is 11 months out. So if you're the person who can plan a year ahead, like you'll probably get the exact room you want, the exact dates you want, everything like that. If you're someone who's more of like a spontaneous or a last minute planner, you might get lucky, but availability like 60 days out is pretty sparse. Like it's pretty hard sometimes to get rooms that close. And then I think kind of the other con, of course, because we've talked about it a lot, is annual dues. Like it's an added cost that you really can't predict. You hope you can budget for, but like sometimes it goes up a little higher than you thought. And I mean, you have to pay for the whole membership. So like you're still going to have a bill every year, even if you've paid off your contract.
Yeah.
That is, I think that's the sticking point with me, or with us at least, is the annual dues. Like I understand that that's part of the contract and everything. It's just it's sticking in my brain. I'm like, if especially if you buy it like Vero Beach, like you were talking about, and you have those high dues, you're just like, it's so high, But again, teach their own.
I mean, yeah. I've been told I have control issues sometimes, so maybe I don't have the control there. I don't know.
That is not it.
Listen, you guys are not alone. Every time I make a video about annual dues, I get so many comments of like, well, is it really worth it if you have to pay them every year? Or like, is there a way I can kind of get the cost down? Like a lot of people, that's their sticking point. For me, I've kind of rationalized it as, once my contracts are paid off, all I'm responsible for are those annual dues. And I would probably be paying 2 to 3 times as much to take my same vacations if I was paying cash instead of just paying my annual dues every year.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it comes down to, I mean, it's, maybe the argument is like buying groceries at Costco. Like if your time you go, it's going to be more expensive, but if you buy in bulk, it is cheaper over the long run, perhaps.
Right.
Like stuff like that, but again, like you said, depends on how you vacation. So you said you get to stay in deluxe resorts and not pay the deluxe price tag. What is it more compared to like paying moderate prices? Like, when all the math shakes out, or is it like maybe a little bit more than moderate, but not quite as much as you would pay for a deluxe typically?
I've kind of found it to be online with like Coronado Springs kind of pricing if you want to pick like a specific moderate resort, only because once they built that tower, kind of the value of Coronado went up a little bit. So it kind of is that in between moderate and deluxe. So, I mean, I've priced out Coronado for just, quick 1 or 2 night vacations, and to see like $350 a night, like my brain can't handle it.
Yeah.
That seems like a lot.
It's such a that resort we've talked about before. It's so weird. It's like, it's a moderate resort with a deluxe tower just in the middle of it. It's a beautiful tower. It's just a very strange.
It's gorgeous.
It's just a very strange way to lay it out, because it's like your brain's is not. It's hard to wrap around there. But
That's a good comparison, though. Like thinking of the tower as a comparison for the prices.
Well, and we've talked about it. It's almost like, I mean, I would almost classify it as either a moderate plus or a deluxe, light or something, deluxe value or something, because it's like it's not quite either one. So yeah.
Well, we're going to kind of shift over the conversation into talking about the new Fort Wilderness cabins that are being refurbed into DVC cabins. So we talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we had a discussion, kind of just what we were thinking about them. So we kind of wanted to get your opinion about what they're going to be, what's coming, like what it all includes. And I know they just went on sale a couple days ago. I think it was February 1st. So just real quick, what are the contracts like right now? Like how much is it price per point for contracts at Fort Wilderness?
So the cabins at Fort Wilderness did just go on sale for existing members on February 1st, and then it'll be open to everybody on February 27th. So they are selling at $225 per point, which is pretty high. Not as high as some other properties, but it's a pretty high starting price, and it will most likely only go up from here.
Is that because, I mean, when they were just cash rooms that are just regular hotel rooms, they were pretty hard to, like, they were always like sold out. It was really hard to get a room here. Is it just because there's not a lot of them, and yet there's quite a bit of demand for them?
I think so. So this resort is going to be really unique because I don't think DVC is going after their typical customer. Like the typical DVC member wants to stay in like a Riviera or a Polynesian, like a typical deluxe resort. I think what they're trying to do is go to a very specific niche Disney fan. And those cabins were always hard to get. Like people love staying at Fort Wilderness. They love the cabins. but it's not going to have the typical amenities that I think a DVC member would expect, like an existing member like myself. So I think what they're trying to do is like get a new market of DVC member who loves staying at Fort Wilderness, wants to be sure that they can stay there every year, and maybe this is a more cost-effective way to do that.
Okay, I get that. And we were talking again on the show a couple weeks ago that, sleeping 6 versus like a 1-bedroom layout at a different resort would sleep like a maximum of 5. I feel like that in and of itself would open up a lot of opportunities for bigger families, bigger groups to stay all in one place and maybe pay less than they would for like a 1-bedroom.
Yeah, and it's kind of a perfect between a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, because most of your 2-bedrooms will sleep 8 or 9. So if you don't have that big of a group, and maybe you want more of like the standalone, like where you're not sharing walls with people, I think it would also be a really good fit for that kind of traveler. But like you're saying, families that, have 5 or 6 people in them, maybe even a family of 4 that just kind of wants something different than your typical hotel, like this would be a good place for them.
Yeah. And what do you think of the layout and the theme?
So I really like the modern kind of aesthetic they're going for, because I still think they're kind of keeping it rustic and like a little more true to Fort Wilderness as it is right now. I would have preferred the exterior to remain log cabins just because I thought it was a cool look. The layout, it's not something I'm in love with, only because I'm thinking like if you have 2 people sleeping in the main bedroom and then people sleeping out on the couch, like if you're in that bedroom and you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you're like walking through the living room to get to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So
It is an
I
odd,
always kind of like think of weird logistics with layouts, and that just, I don't know if that would work.
it is an odd layout. I mean, we talked about it too. Like it's an odd shaped building. It's probably part of it as well, but and I thought I was being original, but apparently Jamie already said this, but I was like, if the audience they're going for are big fans of maybe IKEA in the woods, they just went to IKEA and they're like, I would love this in a woodsy setting, and they're like, we got you. We got this thing right here.
Definitely that aesthetic, yes.
Yeah. Maybe like, I don't know if this is a thing. Maybe Swedish people in the woods. That's what they really like.
Well, maybe they do.
I mean, I don't know.
And we briefly touched on this. I think you mentioned about the dues here. What are the dues for Fort Wilderness?
So the dues are going to be $12.15 per point. So that is the second highest in the DVC catalog as it stands right now. The only resort higher than them is Vero Beach, and that is a hurricane-prone standalone resort.
Yeah.
So kind of like I said earlier, I think maybe what went into this is the fact that they are standalone structures. That's going to require a lot of housekeeping. The fact that they allow pets, that might require more maintenance, the buses, and being standalone structures, like if Central Florida gets a hurricane, they might see a little bit more damage than a building like Riviera would.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Well, even probably like, keeping power washing individual buildings and stuff like that, keeping it clean. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what they'll look like whenever they're done. By the way, do you know how many of these they have?
So from what I've heard, they have 15 that are completed.
Okay.
So they're going to have to be building them in stages. They most likely won't finish putting all of them in place because they're built offsite and then brought on. So I think they won't be finished until like mid 25. Like that's when they'll all be in.
Okay.
So availability there is going to be really hard the first year and a half. Maybe it'll ease up once they're all in. But like I said, I think it's going to be a really popular resort, especially for existing DVC members who want to try something new or that kind of niche market they might be going after.
And does this interest you specifically? Like, would you ever buy here?
I don't think so, only because it's not for me what I'm looking for in a DVC resort. Like Fort Wilderness is really cool, and the couple times that I've never stayed there, but I've visited to go to like Hoop-Dee-Doo and things, like it's a really cool place, but I kind of prefer the more typical deluxe where there's like a table service and a quick service like within really quick walking distance of my room, and I kind of like being in like a bigger hotel structure.
Hmm.
I definitely would try staying here for like a couple nights just to, get the feel of the resort and get to experience it, but I don't think if I was buying today this would be my first pick.
Fair enough.
Now, have you heard anything? Because I don't think Disney has said anything officially. I don't know if everybody remembers the rehab facility, Reflections, that they were going to build over this area, also known as a DVC resort. Is that still in the work? They haven't said anything about it, and they've kind of just
Quietly.
they just kind of have it. But have you heard anything if that's still something that they're planning on doing, or is it just sort of quietly being sort of shuffled off to the side?
Yeah, so as far as DVC goes, Reflections is the resort that shall not be named because they never talk about it anymore. Like all of the literature about it, any mention of it has been completely scrubbed from the website. There's no mention of maybe we'll build it down the road or maybe I think it's kind of a dead project. And it's unfortunate because I was kind of looking forward to seeing what Reflections was going to look like. I wasn't in love with the name, but I liked how they were kind of doing that modern rustic theme. So I would eventually like to see it down the road. I just don't know if it will happen.
Yeah.
I wonder what they'll do with that space then, because it's all like leveled off. I mean,
All cleared.
poor river country.
Playground.
Finally went away.
Yeah, who knows? Now, I didn't know. When will they start selling points on the Polynesian Tower?
Good question.
Because is that supposed to be done like late this year? Correct.
Like sometime this year, right?
I can remember the date they said.
Yeah, I think we'll see them start selling points maybe summer this year.
Yeah.
With like maybe an opening late this year, early next year. I think the thing that they're going to be kind of running up against is they're going to have so many resorts actively selling at the same time. So you're going to have Polynesian Points, Fort Wilderness, Riviera, Alani, which they cannot seem to sell out. Like you're just going to have so many resorts to pick from. I wonder if they hold off on starting poly sales until they see how Fort Wilderness goes.
Yeah.
I tell you the rumblings I hear about Polynesian Tower is that people are very excited because I know there's a lot of people that love Polynesian Resort, but maybe held off on buying from there because they were limited to just studios and the bungalows basically. And then now with the tower, that just opens up like so many more possibilities. So I think people are going to be like really excited to buy here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really excited about Polynesian. I know a lot of people they're literally waiting to buy in until Polynesian goes on. So
I wonder what the price is going to be.
I know.
It's like
we're going to have a nice line of folks in the phone queue on the first day it goes on sale.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I look at a resort like Grand Californian over in at Anaheim, Disneyland, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it like $330 a point?
The last time I looked, yeah, it was up there. And even on the resale market, I think the lowest I've ever seen it go for is like $265 a point. Like it is a hard to get resort and people know it. So
Yeah. So I hope Polynesia's not that expensive. Hopefully not. But we are in Florida and they're in California, so
This is true. Well, and I guess ask a question here because we have rented DVC points in the past. And I know this is a way a lot of people, maybe if they're dipping their toes into maybe doing DVC or they, want to stay at a deluxe a little bit cheaper. So obviously DVC owners will rent their points out from time to time. Is this something that you personally recommend people to try or like you have places for them to do it? And, is this something, because I know some people buy with the intention of renting points out. Is that something that you would say that you'd stay away from or anything like that?
So it is a whispered thing within the community that there are people who will buy contracts just to rent them out and have income from that. You still have to pay taxes on it. It's not like tax-free income. It's generally frowned upon in the DVC community to do that and like openly admit that you do that because you're taking away rooms from members who would book them. So I would just not recommend it. And then if you're wanting to try DVC, if you're not really sure if it's for you or you're trying to figure out which resort you want to buy into, renting points is a great way to do it because you're still not paying what you would be paying if you booked with cash through Disney. You're still getting a pretty good discount there. And it's kind of like a no strings attached way to try it out. So if you try Animal Kingdom Lodge and you really don't like it that much, you can always try Grand Floridian without the commitment of buying in and then trying it out.
Yeah. That makes it, like we said, we've done it a few times and have had pretty good experiences, but it's definitely one of those things where you can go, person to person, but you got to be very careful because people do get scammed on this.
Well, you can do it direct from a member, but you can also do third party.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Some people feel uncomfortable. Like you got to, if you're doing it direct from a member, I mean, and Jamie's done this a lot. Like you've got to, your P's and Q's and what to look out for and certain things. But if you're uncomfortable with that, I mean, we've personally used, there's a bunch out there now. Like I know we've David's DVC and you probably know of a few.
Is it DVC resale?
DVC rental store.
DVC rental store. Yeah.
Where you can rent. So basically they're the middleman between owners and people who want to rent points. You'll pay a little bit more that way than renting directly, but you do have, I guess you just have the assurance that like it's all above board. You're not going to potentially get, defrauded or anything like that. But that is, I just wanted to bring up because we've done it a few times and it's been great when we've done it.
Yeah.
We've stayed.
No problems or anything.
No, and usually like even we've rented directly from people and they've been really great to work with. If there's been any issues, like sometimes you get issues on like the reservation and stuff like that. But I think it's something if people are curious about it, it's a good way to sort of, like you said, dip your toes in and, try it out.
I tell you, whenever the parks open back up in late 2020, there were a lot of people that couldn't travel to Florida, and a lot of people were trying to rent their points out, and so we got some very good deals for like the next 3 months after that. But
well, I guess that would be a question if you are, let's say you a DVC and you can't travel that year for some reason. That's why a lot of people will rent points, correct? Like they can at least get something for their points that they already paid for.
Yeah, especially if you get into a situation like a lot of members did during COVID where they couldn't travel. So that was a problem for a lot of international members who weren't able to come into the States and then go back to their home countries. Yeah. So you had a lot of people who were like rolling points into the next year and then they still couldn't use them. And when we bank points forward, you have to use them in that year or they expire.
Right.
So you had a lot of people who banked points thinking like, oh, I'll be able to travel next year. Everything will be fine. And then all of a sudden, maybe they couldn't. So they were renting those points out. So then at least they weren't, completely wasted. They could still get a little bit money back for them. And I know a lot of people who kind of get in similar situations where either they borrowed points or they banked points and they just need to get rid of them before they expire. And it's always nice to have a little extra income.
Yeah.
It's true.
Makes sense. All right. You got any other questions?
I was going to ask you, do you know of any special offers that Disney's offering right now if you buy any of their contracts?
So I do. Okay. Disney is doing their late winter incentives right now. They go until April 1st. But these incentives also accompanied a price hike.
Of course.
So for some of them, it might not really be saving you a ton of money, but they have to push them. So Alani, Disneyland Hotel, and Riviera are the three that are having incentives right now just because Fort Wilderness just went on sale. So they're not going to do a ton of incentives around that just yet. So for members, if you add on at Alani, you can save $17 per point if you buy at least 150. Disneyland Hotel, you can save $11 per point, and Riviera, you can save $11 per point. If you're a new member, so you don't have any points at all and you're just starting, at Alani, you can save $10 per point if you buy at least 150. Disneyland Hotel is $5 per point, and then Riviera is $7 per point. So there's a little bit of savings, but for some, it doesn't quite offset that price increase. So,
yeah, I mean, that makes sense. They have to make it back somehow.
I mean, Disney never does that. They never raise prices on anything. I know. All right. Well, I think you got any more questions?
I was just gonna say, if someone is interested in buying a contract or looking up DVC or wanting to tour like one of the units or whatever, is it easiest to call or should they just stop by? I mean, because I know like we've toured the Cascade cabins at Copper Creek before. And
well, we walked in when they were actively just giving tours.
But I mean, like, so would you say in person is better? Calling, like, what would you recommend if someone's interested?
So it's difficult to say that anything positive came out of 2020. But one of the things that was a good thing, especially for DVC, is they've started doing a lot more tours at the resorts. So any of the deluxe resorts that you go into that have that little DVC kiosk or desk, they set model rooms aside that people aren't staying in so you can see the room in its resort. So for a lot of people, that's been helpful with picking where they want to buy as a home resort because you're going through the motions of getting to the resort and getting to the room and really seeing what it looks like in its hotel. So you can do that. I recommend that if you're not really sure which place to buy, you can kind of see them all. They do tours on property. If you go through the parks, you'll see all the DVC kiosks. They'll sign you up for a little info session with a guide. They will pick you up from the park, take you to that little info session, and then they'll basically drop you off wherever you want on property. So if you want to go back to your resort, they'll take you there. If you want to go back to the park, they'll do that. In person, I think you really get the full experience of DVC while you're at the Disney park, but it's still a very low pressure sale. Like most of the guides will not tell you to buy while you're still on vacation. They'll say like, all right, so here's all the information. Once you get home, think about it for a week or two, call if you have any questions, or they'll call you after like 2 weeks, but they try not to get you while you're still in vacation mode. Because a lot of people, if they bought while they're on vacation, when they go home, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just spent like $15,000 on DVC. Like, this is ridiculous. And they'll try to cancel it.
Yeah.
So they really try to make it like they give you a lot of time to think about it. I know for me, I tried to buy 25 more points while I was on vacation. Like I was sitting at the Polynesian pool and I called my guide and I was like, I think I need like 25 more points. And he's like, okay, so here's how much it's going to be. Go home and we'll talk next week. Like there was no like, oh, let me just get your credit card number. Like they really want you to know that you're making a good decision.
I mean, that's good. I mean, especially being a timeshare, they've got, I'm sure, you know, they don't have the best of reputations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's true. But yeah, these vacation club salesmen, they're great.
They are. And I will say over the years, like they're not overly pushy. And I've talked to a lot of people who have said the same thing. Like they don't try and high pressure you. So that is good, especially, you know, if you want people to actually be happy with their purchase, which is I've never understood the whole timeshare thing of like doing that anyways. I'm like, you're just going to get a bunch of people that don't want your product. Like it's just weird.
I hate calling it a timeshare though, because it's really, I mean, it's so different than like a regular timeshare.
It's an experience share.
Yes.
There you go. I don't know.
It's a point share.
Well, yeah. You're sharing something either way.
I don't know.
But yeah. So, well, thank you for being on, Samantha. First time. We'll have you on more, I'm sure. They can find you at DVC Millennial on Instagram. Are you on Twitter as well?
So I'm not on Twitter, but you can find me at DVC Millennial on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, basically almost anywhere but Twitter.
I guess I should say X now.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Not on X.
Yeah, that's good. And then like I said, all your content revolves around DVC, so you're a great resource for this. Just tell everybody where they can find you, anything else you want them to know, and all that. I know you said you have a newsletter you do as well.
I do. I have a monthly newsletter, and every other month is a resort guide. I am going to be doing Riviera next month. And the months in between, I do little Learn DVC with Me guides. So I talk about vacation points, home resorts, all different DVC topics. So if you're just starting your research, they're kind of little one-page starter guides.
Okay.
Love it. That's awesome.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It was awesome. I learned a lot. I'm a novice to DVC, so I learned a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to take it with me.
Put it in your hat.
Put it in my pocket and keep it with me.
I didn't know where you were going to put it. I knew you were going to say you're going to put it somewhere. I'm like, I don't know
right
where
here
you're
in
going
my
to put it.
little pocket. But anyway, I don't know. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.
Thank you.